Ready? Okay, well, item 9 is the month 9 revenue budget monitoring position from 23-24. The purpose of this report is to provide members with details of actual expenditure income and the projected full year outturn position as at the 31st of December against its approved 23-24 joint committee revenue budget. So if I can invite Kelly to come in on this.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So apologies from Chris Lee this morning from the accountable body, but the report will be presented by Harjinder Singh, who's our head of finance, risk and assurance. So I'll hand over to Harjinder, Chair.
Thanks, Harjinder.
Okay, morning and thank you, Chair. This report will be familiar to members as is a report which Chris Lee has brought forward a couple of times this year. Chris set out the month 4 budget position in October, and a further update was brought forward in December, which set out the position at month 6. This report sets out the position at month 9 and covers the period to the 31st of December 2023. The position is set out in Table 1, which shows a projected underspend for the year of just over £412,000. We believe this represents an accurate assessment of where the final spend against the budget may end up, as many of the assumptions which underpin the forecast within that month 9 position are fairly up to date. The variances are set out on page 3, and the key ones to note are the ones in relation to the employee-related budget, and you can see that that's showing an underspend of around £502,000 for the year. And as members will be aware, we've talked about the position and some of the challenges with recruitment at various stages during the year, and that position is reflected in underspend. Although it has to be noted that some of the employee costs have also been charged during the year to some of our external schemes. So we've been working on the Shared Prosperity Fund, for example, and also some of the costs have been charged to the transition budget. So that's crystallised in an underspend of just over £500,000 for the year. The other area to note is the overspend against the CJC transition budget, which is projected to be overspent by £131,000 for the year, and probably reflects that the approved budget of £234,000 for the year was under-resourced, as many of the additional costs that have now crystallised relate to staffing resources that have been channeled towards the transition arrangement, mainly around legal, finance and project management. Chair, the final point I'd make is around paragraph 27, which is set up in the financial implications. Members will recall that the 24-25 CJC budget, which they approved back in January, requires a contribution in the region of £459,000 from City Deal general reserves held on behalf of the local authorities to meet the costs associated with the CJC statutory duties in 24-25. Based on the position set on this report, that looks very achievable, and the final position will be confirmed once the 23-24 accounts are closed in the coming months. And clearly we will bring back an update to member around the final position and what that means for the budget balancing for 24-25. So, Chair, happy to take any decisions, any questions.
Thanks, Harjinder. Any questions, colleagues? If not, the recommendations are at paragraph 31. Are we happy to move to those recommendations? I can have a mover and a seconder. It says Jane Mudd moving and a seconder if possible. Geraint from Merthyr seconding that one. So if I move to the vote then, if I take Monmouthshire. Oh, Marianne, I think you're muted then.
Yes, agreed.
Thanks, Marianne. Blarney Gwent.
Agreed, Chair.
Thanks, Steve. RCT.
Agreed, Chair.
Thanks, Maureen. And then Caerphilly.
Agreed, Chair.
Thanks, Cardiff.
Agreed.
Thanks, Merthyr.
Chair.
Newport.
Agreed, Chair.
Van Glamorgan.
Agreed, Chair.
And Torvine is agreed. So that's carried with 9 votes for. Thank you to officers for their work on that report. If we move then to item number 10, which is the ABP quarter 3 performance report. The purpose of this report is to provide an update on Cardiff Capital Region City Deal progress against the 23-24 quarter 3 performance report. I'd remind members that appendices 1 to 4 of this report are exempt. So if members wish to debate details in those appendices, then we'd need to move to exempt session. So I can invite Kelly to introduce the report.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. So this is the Q3 performance monitoring report against the 23-24 annual business plan. So it's set out in accordance with the priorities that we've established in the 5-year business plan, building back better era, becoming Cardiff Capital Region, scaling up delivery of our city deal, levelling up the region and supporting economic clusters and innovation. So you'll see in paragraph 6 the objectives that were set for 23-24 in relation to becoming more competitive, more connected and more resilient. And it sets out the breadth of the activity that we're involved in, from impact funds to ULEV and to the huge job of work that has been the transition to the Corporate Joint Committee, the new legal entity. There's a summary of progress in paragraphs 8 and 9. You'll see that in Q3, spend was 15 million against a target of just over 16 million. I think that reflects some of the acute challenges that we've just been hearing about, particularly in relation to the Housing Viability Gap Fund. And as we come in now to finish off the Metro Plus scheme, some highlights as well to reflect upon: the second deal done from the Innovation Investment Capital with a company in Bridgend, which is an excellent deal, has excellent prospects for growth in our fintech sector. And of course, another deal coming through the Strategic Premises Fund for the T Newport Hotel. So we do look forward to finalising some of these schemes that have been hanging around for quite some time, such as Metro Plus, and some new momentum, I now believe, behind the Metro Central project as well. The non-investment activity, Chair, is set out at paragraph 11. I hope that reflects on some of the breadth and the richness of the additional activity that we're involved in relation to policy development, influencing and opinion forming. And of course, the communication highlights are set out there. Again, hopefully that shows the scope and scale of activity and the reach that we're getting in terms of positive publicity. Paragraph 14, our AGS actions, our annual governance statement. You can see all of those are in train and on target. Paragraph 18, our internal audit recommendations have all been actioned. Paragraph 20, I would normally include a paragraph on resources. I believe that's been superseded now by transition into CJC and the need to present a whole new structure, which, Chair, I intend to do at a future meeting. Paragraph 22 is an update on our risk register. And on that note, Chair, I will commend the recommendations to you, which are set out at paragraph 34 and allow us to submit to UK and Welsh Government.
Thank you, Kelly. And also, you mentioned the huge amount of work that's gone into transition to the CJC in that report, and I think we can all thank the staff for the officers for their hard work on that. I know it's been a lot of work, but I think future generations of officers, members, and hopefully residents will thank you for the work you've done there, because I think it's prevented sort of unnecessary duplication in the future. I know it hasn't been easy, so thanks for that work. Any questions or comments from colleagues on the reports? Are we happy to move to the recommendations at paragraph 34 then? If I could have a seconder, a mover and a seconder for those, if possible, please.
Happy to move, Chair.
Thanks, Geraint has moved.
Second.
And Liz has seconded that one. So I can move to the votes then. Mumbershire?
Agreed, Chair.
Glenagwent?
Agreed, Chair.
Thanks, Steve. RCT?
Agreed, Chair.
Caerphilly?
Agreed, Chair.
Thanks, Sean. Cardiff?
Great.
Thanks, Hugh. Merthyr?
Yeah.
Thanks, Geraint. Newport?
Agreed, Chair.
Thanks, Jane. And Vale Glamorgan?
Agreed, Chair.
Thanks, Liz. And Torvine agreed. So that again is carried unanimously with nine votes. So if we now move to agenda item 11, which is the Gateway Review midterm report and the academic panel feedback. This report provides an overview of the completed midterm report as part of the Cardiff Capital Region City Deal Gateway Review, which will be submitted to the Department of Levelling Up, Housing and Communities in April 2024, and also provides a summary of the feedback received from the academic panel on the midterm evidence papers submitted. For members to note, Appendix 1 of this report is exempt. So if you wish to debate the details of that exempt appendix, then let me know and we can move to exempt session. But if I can hand over to Kelly.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Very pleased to be presenting this report, which I hope gives a sense of good news and promise to come for the Gateway Review itself. And I'll hand over to Colin Mahaffey, who has led this work, Chair.
Thanks, Kelly. Yes, so for background then, I set out from paragraph 3 onwards here. So we're currently in Gateway Review 2 for the Cardiff Capital Region City deal. That cycle will end in March 2026, and the purpose of this midterm report is an 18-month out analysis of where we are as a city deal. It's important to emphasise this is an independently produced report. We provide the evidence for the report as a city deal, but the report itself is submitted to an academic panel for, if you like, feedback, but that's done independent of CCR city deal. So really, we're getting an independent update on the progress of the city deal. We're setting out emerging findings from the capacity development and partnership working research, and also identifying any issues that need to be addressed in advance of the final Gateway Review. I'd like to put on record also thanks to members, to local authority colleagues for their ongoing efforts in this endeavour, because they have a hand to play in this as well in terms of providing feedback. Paragraph 14, we outline some of the key findings of the research that's been conducted, and I'll just go through some highlights, some notes. In terms of the strategic level benefits, the wider investment fund universally really was seen as important in increasing local economic development capacity. There was a note around about good investment decisions that have been made and that key learnings have been applied. We have really excelled in terms of the partnership working. The high level vision for the investment was noted as being shared across partners. And there was a good balance between commercial viability and the drive for inclusive and sustainable growth. Also, positive engagement at a political level remains a strong feature of CCR City Deal. That's an important observation from the external assessors in that regard. In terms of governance, our overall governance was noted as robust, and the one point of feedback there was that potentially the risk appetite might need adjusted at times. Likewise, our evidence collection was seen as very strong. We identified priority clusters. We've used evidence to drive that. And there was one request that we perhaps in the future draw on the use of international comparator evidence a little bit more. In terms of the academic panel who received this report, they supplied feedback to us, which was positive. There was some discussion and interest of this institutional context for City Deal, i.e. the upcoming transition to the Corporate Joint Committee. And also they've asked that at the final report stage, we feedback more on that transition, how it's gone in terms of management in the city deal in that regard. They also noted our relatively positive performance in terms of productivity and GBA growth. And there was direct comment that there was a sense that there is good management going on of the Cardiff Capital Region City deal. In terms of next steps, CCR officers will further develop the resource plan to ensure we meet the Gateway Review satisfactorily, and also preparatory work for the final report has already begun in that regard. And at paragraph 34, we set out the recommendation that Regional Cabinet note the positive progress against the Gateway Review process and the subsequent academic panel feedback.
Thank you for that report, Colin, and for your hard work on this, and other officers too. Have we got any questions or comments from members? Are we happy then to move to the recommendations of paragraph 34? If I could have a mover and a seconder.
Move it, Chair.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Steve Thomas moving and Jane Mudd seconding. And start with the vote then. Monmouthshire.
Agreed, Chair.
Thanks. Blarney Gwent.
Agreed.
RCT.
Agreed, Chair.
Caerphilly.
Agreed.
Cardiff.
Agreed.
Merthyr.
Agreed, Chair.
Newport.
Agreed, Chair.
Bella Glamorgan.
Agreed, Chair.
And Torvine is agreed. So that's carried with 9 votes. Thank you, members. If we move then to agenda item 12, I believe we've got left, which is the transfer of Cardiff Capital Region City Deal to the South East Wales Corporate Joint Committee. The purpose of this report is to seek the final approval for the transfer of Cardiff Capital Region City Deal and associated funding programmes to the South East Wales Corporate Joint Committee, and comes at the end of a lot of work in that respect. I can remind members that appendices 6 and 7 of the report are exempt. So again, if you wish to debate those, then let me know and we'll have to move into exempt session. But I'd like to invite Kelly to give this report.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. This is the main event for today and does really signify the final report of the last meeting of the Cardiff Capital Region Cabinet. Of course, since 2021 and the introduction of legislation by Welsh Government to create 4 corporate joint committees in Wales, the Cardiff Capital Region Cabinet has held a policy position of lift and shift, i.e. take the city deal and place it into the new corporate legal entity. So CJCs, as we know, are statutory bodies with statutory policy duties for economic wellbeing, regional transport planning and strategic development planning. And the view has always been that these activities really do complement, supplement and add value to the work that was started under programmes like City Deal and of course new ones like the investment zone. And because the 10 local authorities named in the regulations are the same 10 local authorities that have been taken forward, Cardiff Capital Region City Deal, with the addition of colleagues in Brecon Beacons National Park for planning purposes, this was felt to be the best way to create one system of integrated regional development. Originally, and members will recall, it was the case that transfer was going to go ahead back in February, March 2022. But because some of the legislation needed enhancing, particularly around VAT status, and of course those 8 consequential amendments, that couldn't happen because we had to wait for primary legislation to be affected by UK government to ensure the CJCs were on a strong enough footing. These issues were all subsequently resolved back in 2023. And since that time, we've been working towards the date of the 1st of April for full transition to the CJC. So some key stage posts along the way. Back on the 4th of December 2023, Cabinet consented to novate the City Deal funding agreement held by Cardiff Council on behalf of Cardiff Capital Region City Deal to the CJC, consented to transfer the full portfolio of projects from Cardiff Council held on behalf of CCR CD to the CJC, agreement to transfer responsibility for decision making and implementation from the City Deal to the CJC. And of course, we've had a member group that's been working hard every single Monday morning since to work on governance matters and to inform development of a constitution, which hopefully has been a good and worthwhile process that hopefully we can replicate again. So all of this has now culminated in a very significant piece of work that you have in front of you today. It's first of all the CJC's draft constitution, which, as I say, I think reflects upon a very comprehensive process. It's been through various iterations in the last few weeks and months. It was commended by the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee of CCR just a week and a half ago, and we have the chair with us today, and hopefully we'll read out some of the comments from the letter that you have appended to the pack. So the Constitution is appended number 1, and the letter from the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee is at Appendix 2. The Constitution has 6 key parts: the summary, the articles, the allocations of responsibility, the rules of procedure, codes and protocol, and of course, for continuity purposes, the City Deal standing orders. So if we can move on to paragraph 19, you'll see a familiar document. It's the CCR CD assurance framework. Again, that relates to protocols and controls regarding the wider investment fund, and these have been simply updated to reflect the changes in the new governance structure. So members, you have that at Appendix 3. Number 3 then is the novation of funding agreements, which you'll find at paragraph 23. It relates to the deeds of novation, which have been prepared, which transfer all Cardiff Council's rights and obligations in respect of funding awards for Cardiff Capital Region City Deal across to the CJC on the 1st of April. And it really sets out how these relate to our grant funds. We've just been talking about the Housing Viability Gap Fund, SBRI, local energy schemes, and so on. And of course, following transfer, there will be a final reconciliation just to make sure no liabilities are left with Cardiff Council. and their balance sheet. So again, this is all set out in Appendix 4, and we call these the Level 1 funding agreements. So on to number 4 then, which is fund management agreements. We call these blocks of finance. They're held by Cardiff Council in relation to things like sub-funds, impact funds, our limited liability partnership for innovation investment capital, for example, the strategic premises fund, but also cooperation agreements that we have in place with partners like Cardiff University on the Challenge Fund and Transport for Wales on things like Cardiff Central Station. Again, these are all set out in Appendix 4, and we call these the Level 2 funding agreements. If we move on to number 5 then, which is wholly owned companies, this relates to our SPVs, CCR Energy and CS Foundry, which we've heard about this morning. And it proposes that the CJC becomes the sole shareholder on behalf of all 10 councils and through the new CJC. I want to point out as well that Appendix 5, the new governance policy for CCR Energy is also set out, which shows how governance will be enacted for CCR Energy and the relationship back with the South East Wales CJC. Number 6 is the portfolio transfer. That covers the range of other projects, such as loans, equity funds, grants that have been made and Cardiff Council has entered into on behalf of Cardiff Capital Region City Deal, and which will be transferred across to the CJC. So again, you'll find those at Appendix 4, and we refer to those as the Level 3 funded projects. And of course, to note as well, where that includes Monmouthshire County Council, because from time to time they've had to act as the accountable body where Cardiff Council has been the recipient of funds. So all of that is covered off there. Some tax advice there as well, and in paragraph 46 relating to all of this, which is really important. If you recall at the outset, transition of some of the City Deal projects to CJC could have incurred a further tax liability. So KPMG has done some tax calculations, and with the benefit of the updated legislation in place, you can see that has a net neutral effect. And for completeness, again, we've put the full tax advice in the report at Appendix 6. So all of those draft deeds of novation are there. They supplement this, and they are again attached to the report at Appendix 7. So number 7 on my list are operational contracts. This is much more minor, where we have contracts with agencies for PR, financial advice, management, fund management, legal advice. Clearly, all of that has to be transferred over again. So we've set those out in Level 4 agreements, which are again in Appendix 4 of the report. Number 8, service level agreements are paragraph 51, the new SLAs that we will be agreeing with RCT Council. We're going to be providing some transactional service support into the CJC for things like finance, HR, audit support, payroll, ICT, and all data management and protection issues. For completeness, I think I mentioned it already, RCT also hosts the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Number 9 is future decision making. So the Regional Cabinet is asked to delegate any future decisions to CJC, including things like the 22-23 accounts, which have not yet concluded. There will be other things such as audit plans as well. So you'll see a list set out there in paragraph 53. And finally, just while I take a breath, number 10 is dissolution of the Cardiff Capital Region's Cabinet. That is all set out at paragraph 54, which finally transfers all decision making from Cardiff Capital Region Cabinet to the new CJC and dissolves regional cabinet. So closes this current chapter. The best news of all is you will no longer have to have 2 meetings, and I'm sure that's very much welcome. And thank you for your patience while we've gotten to this point. Chair, I'll ask Jane to come in just a few seconds' time, because there is a short addendum to the Constitution which we've sent around this morning, which reflects some comments that we have received. And also, if we could ask the Chair of the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee to make some comments as well, given the session that we've had. But just from me, really, just to thank everyone for great patience. It's taken some time. It hasn't been the easiest route to get in here, but I do fundamentally believe it is the right thing to do to bring everything together and have that solid platform for regional working. Many of us were at MIPIM in Cannes last week, and I think we all reflected upon, we were on the main stage in Cannes many times with other UK city regions, sometimes with international city regions. And it's easy to think, isn't it, the Cardiff Capital Region is small, it's relatively immature, you know, we haven't been on this journey for very long. But I felt really reassured last week that I think we're far ahead of the game in certain spaces, and I think we've got a lot of really positive things to shout about. And sometimes it takes standing on an international stage to really realise that. So, Chair, I want to pass my thanks. I wouldn't normally do this because as officers, this is our job. But this has been above and beyond day job for so many months, weekends included, for so many people. Jane and the legal team and governance team in particular, you can see all of the work that's gone into the Constitution. Hundreds of funding agreements have had to be novated. So thanks to Jane and the team, to colleagues in Cardiff Council that have worked with us so diligently on this, Monmouthshire as well, to all of the officer team who've just done such a phenomenal job. They've kept at it. And I want to thank Frank Holmes in particular as well, in terms of leading our REGP, our investment panel, Kevin Gardner, Nigel Griffiths, some of the prominent people who've been there, supported us throughout this process, and also have always been on the end of the phone for me when I've needed the therapy. So regional work in collaboration is never easy, is it? You know, it's hard work. This is difficult. It's challenging. But fundamentally, time and time again, I think it's proved that this is absolutely the right thing to be doing. So, Chair, perhaps I can hand over to Jane, and then maybe we could bring the JOS Chair in, if that's okay, Chair, before we go to the final recommendations.
Sure. Come in, Jane.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a short update, please. So obviously, Regional Cabinet is asked to simply note the CJC's draft constitution. It'll be for the CJC meeting to adopt it if they see fit. But before members note it, there are some small amendments. The Brecon Beacons member has expressed an interest in the National Park Authority being entitled to nominate members to Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee and to the Governance and Audit Committee. The draft amendments, in fact, don't change anything in law. In relation to the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee, that is a joint committee of the 10 councils, and it's a matter for the members of that committee to decide if they wish to pass a resolution to co-opt any other member. But it certainly wouldn't prevent the Brecon Beacons National Park Authority from seeking that. In relation to the Governance and Audit Subcommittee, there's a requirement in law for that to be split, so it's 2/3 council members, 1/3 lay members, and there is nothing in law that would prevent Brecon Beacons National Park Authority from nominating somebody to essentially sit as a lay member of that committee. So hopefully that's an explanation of the background for the proposed changes in relation to the two subcommittees. The National Park Authority has also asked if they could be a member of the Chief Executives Group when that group is discussing matters relating to strategic planning. So provision has been made for that also in the draft amendment. If members are content with those amendments, then in the next meeting, in the CJC meeting, the recommendation will be to adopt the Constitution as amended. Is there anything else?
Thank you, Jane. And now over to Andrew Whitcomb as the chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Welcome to the meeting, and yeah, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I would like to thank the Democratic Services team at RCT for the letter they produced, which highlighted some of the minor changes, although we had a very long meeting on it. And I'd also like to thank all of you who are leaders here for supporting the participation on the committee. Before the last election, attendance was pretty poor, to be honest. It has now improved immensely. And I'd like to ask for your continued support in members attending. The reason I became chair was because I was the only member of the committee that was on the committee before the last election. So, but I really enjoyed it. But the support we're getting from all the team is excellent. We had a long discussion about it, the transition to the new body, and we would like to formally support the new constitution as amended. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, and thank you to yourself and to the members of the Overall Scrutiny Committee for their contribution to that. It provides us great assurance. So thank you. Right, okay, over to members then. Any questions or comments? Jane.
Thank you, Chair. I echo Kelly's comments, and I'm absolutely delighted that the Chair of Scrutiny has joined us today as well, and really welcome his feedback too. I'd just like to say, Chair, that all of us are on a journey, aren't we? And this, for many of us, this has formed part of our journey. But in reflecting, I think on this pretty momentous occasion, how far we've come, it would be remiss of us not to acknowledge the contributions that those colleagues who actually came together to start CCR made really in establishing us. My goodness me, look how we've grown and developed since then. So I would like to pay tribute to those colleagues who came together at the beginning to start CCR, to those colleagues who are still part of CCR and CJC, but unable to join us here today. And really to everybody who's worked to develop what I would say as certainly that I would identify as part of my journey with this, are relationships that are based on trust, that are strong, and really form that firm bedrock there for moving forward. So huge thank you to everybody who's been involved, but really important to recognise the contributions of those colleagues who've come before us. Thank you.
Well said. Any other contributions, members? I would like to add the thanks that have been given to Kelly, to Jane, and to the officers for all their hard work on this. I know it's not been easy. The lift and shift request was ours, and I believe it's the right thing to do in the long term, but it has put a lot of work onto you. So thank you for that, and also to scrutiny members for their contribution to that as well. The RAGP was mentioned, and the relationship we've had with them, I think, has been a great cornerstone of our development as a region. We've got that sort of honest but collegiate advice from business sector and from academia, and that is something I think is of great value as we evidence what we do going forwards. I mentioned the lift and shift, the importance that I think we attached as leaders to having one integrated regional development system, not having, different things going on in parallel to each other. It's very much the maxim of more partnership, fewer meetings, better outcomes. And I think that's the important thing going forwards. And I think, this way of doing it will put us in a good place to achieve that. I'd like to echo the comments of Councillor Mudd. I think the foundations of our partnership has very much been about relationships and culture, about trust of each other, compared to, perhaps where our constituent councils were 10, 20 years ago. I think that the trust that we've built up between each other, the way that we recognise we all do things differently, but that we can work together as a team, the lack of parochial sort of bargaining that goes on in this, we're all signed up to the region as a concept and to the collective benefit that we can give to the whole of the area, the whole of the CCR, the whole of the 10 authorities, and also the lack of petty politics as well. We've worked together as Labour, as independent, as Conservative leaders, together for the best of the region, and that's something I've very much valued. I've had the privilege of being your chair for the last 4 years, and I know Andrew found that privilege as well when he did it beforehand. So I think that message for all those who have come before is an important one too. So just thank you to everyone who's played a part in this. As I say, it has been a lot of work to do the lift and shift and the transition, to novate all the arrangements to set up the constitution and to get our governance right. I may glaze over talk of governance sometimes, but that doesn't mean I don't recognise its importance in providing the basis for us to get the outcomes that we want for the people that we represent. So thank you to everyone who's been involved in that. Any other questions or comments before I move to the recommendations? They're at paragraph 75. There's 11 of them, so I won't read them all out. You'll be pleased to know. But if I can have a mover and a seconder for those recommendations. That's Jane Mudd has moved. A seconder, if possible. Liz Burnett
to
has seconded. Just got in before you. Sorry, Marianne. So I'll take a vote on those. Monmouthshire.
Agreed, Chair.
Thanks, Marianne. Brian Gwent.
Agreed, Chair.
Thanks, Steve. RCT.
Agreed, Chair.
Thanks, Caerphilly.
I agree, Chair. If you like throwing the report up in the air in celebration.
Confetti. Thanks, Sean. Cardiff.
Agree.
Thanks, you. Merthyr.
Agree, Chair.
Let's go right. Newport.
Agreed, Chair.
Thanks, Jane. Vale Glamorgan.
Agreed, Chair.
Thanks, Liz. And Torvine has agreed. So that marks the carrying of that by 9 votes to none, and the the dissolving of regional cabinet. We've just voted to dissolve ourselves. So congratulations, members. And that brings appropriately today's meeting to a close. Thanks everyone for participating. And again, thanks to the officers for